Happy Friday, everyone. My name is Haley Hayhurst, and I'm the owner of Espresso Podcast Production, a full-service podcast agency specializing in marketing, editing, and strategy. So I work with business owners and entrepreneurs to grow their business and use their podcast as the front of their marketing to grow their business, get more clients, make more money, make more sales. So I am very excited to be talking about the strategy part of my business today and how you can increase traffic to your podcast. This is a big question that I get frequently from people with podcasts because sometimes, there's two different ways that you can have a podcast. You can use it as your brand, which I'm going to do another training just on this because this is a big part. So you can use your podcast as your brand, or you can use it as a marketing tool for your brand. So if you're here with me live, tell me you're live and let me know what your podcast is about, and we will go from there. So what I really want to talk about today is how you can get more people listening to your show. And I'll go more into this in detail of if your podcast is your whole brand or if it's a marketing tool, but either way, we want more people listening to our show so we can get more visibility, make more connections, all of that. And so if you are not getting the download numbers that you want, and you're not getting the views you want, you're not getting those connections you want, there's usually a reason behind that. And so the reason I typically see, and what I help most of my clients with, is building out that strategy that will actually convert people to listeners. When we think about starting a podcast, we may think, oh yes, people are going to come listen to me, they're going to be able to find me, all of these things. But the most important thing to keep in mind is podcast platforms are not very searchable. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, there's tons and tons of podcasts, like 2 million podcasts out there. So if you have a podcast, just like Carmen, as short fiction thriller stories, it's definitely important to market your show on social media, because if you're looking for a short fiction thriller story podcast, now that's a little more niche, but there will still be a bunch that show up. And so to stand out, that is the main point here. To stand out, you need to get in front of the right people on social media. So marketing is one of the biggest parts of podcasting. Like Harmon's podcast, like I said, is a little more niche, but when it comes to some of the clients I work with, like financial coaches and business coaches, sales strategists, there are so many podcasts that will show up if you look up sales strategies or financial podcast. So you really need to show up on social media in front of the right eyes to get them to convert to listeners. To back this all up, you need to have a posting social media strategy. So in your podcast, of course, content is the number one important thing. You need to have great content every week. You need to have new content every week. You need to have fun, engaging content, that you're talking about. But then on top of that, you also need to think about how are you going to engage people on social media or outside of your podcast. My favorite ways to do this, I have 3. So the number one way is to start a blog. And like I was saying in the beginning, you can use your podcast as your whole brand, which means your podcast is everything you do. You might have a side business, or you might have a 9-to-5 and your podcast is kind of your side hustle, or you may just do it for fun or something like that. So for that, you can still start a blog with it. If it's something like my podcast or my clients' podcasts, we all have businesses, and then we're using our podcast as a tool to get more listeners or to get more followers, to get more clients. For me, and all of our goals are going to be different. For me, my goal is not to get a ton of listeners. And I know that may sound crazy, but that's just not my goal. My goal is to have an incredible example for my potential clients to listen to so they can hear my editing style. And then, of course, I do want to entertain people. I want to grow my community, and that's another part of my podcast. For some people, your main goal may be to get to 500 listeners per episode, 1,000 listeners per episode. And so what we need to do is build out the strategy. So my favorite way, that's easy, super simple, transcribe your audio. You can use a service like otter.ai. I know Amazon has a transcription service. Headliner has a transcription service. And so transcribe your audio and put it into a blog. This will help with your SEO. This will help you create more content because you can see exactly what you say. You can copy and paste it and into captions. You can copy and paste it into quote cards. Transcribing your audio, if you haven't done so far, is a game changer. Try it out. Try it out for, I would say, a month, like 4 episodes, and see how it can help you create more content. So that is number 1, transcribe your audio and put it into a blog. My second tip for you is social media. And if you are using social media without a strategy, you're not using it right. And that may sound harsh, but there's an easy way to do things and there's a hard way to do things. Trying to grow your podcast without an actual strategy is the hard way to do things. So on social media, I've done trainings on this before, but you're going to want to plan out 3 buckets for your content. You're going to want a education bucket. So this will be exactly what you talk about on your podcast. This will be educating your audience about your guests, about your topics, about your trainings, all of those things. You're going to want to educate people first and foremost. Second, you are going to want to entertain them. So go live on your stories, go live on Instagram, share photos of yourself, do all those things. And then the third bucket, you can switch these out. If you have questions, send me a message and I'll help you plan out your buckets. But the third one that I recommend is personal. So if you look at my Instagram, Espresso Podcast Production, you will see I educate people, I entertain people with reels and quick wins, basically. And then I also share about my business, my life, photos of myself, all of those things. And that really gets my audience to get to know me. And so for your podcast, it's going to be the same way. Plan out exactly what you're going to be posting, when you're going to be posting. One thing I do with my clients is I do themed days. So this is with my one-on-one clients, we plan out like Mondays we'll post something like this, Tuesdays like this. And so every week you don't have to question exactly what it's going to be. And so the third thing that I would recommend to increase traffic to your podcast is, you can do a couple different things. I'm going to split this into 2 because they basically are very, very similar. One is more automated and one is more done, like you have to do it. But you can either run ads or you can do DM outreach. Okay, so this is for 2 different types of people, depending on if you want to run ads, if you know how to run ads, if you want to, if your podcast makes sense to run ads. So you can do ads for that. I don't really do that for my business. I don't really do that for my clients, but I do have a client who's been running ads recently to get people into her Facebook group for her podcast, and it's doing really well. Okay, so you could pay for it, or you can do what I would recommend and do DM outreach. So I've talked about this before again. Reach out to 5 people, just 5 people a day who you know would be engaged listeners. So know who your ideal audience is. Know exactly what they want to hear. Know exactly what they listen to, what they're interested in. Create basically what we call an ideal client avatar or an ideal listener avatar. So once you know exactly who it is listening to your podcast, there's no question about it. It's women in their 30s who are single moms and are in a full-time corporate career or whatever it is. Get that specific, and then you can start DMing people, just connecting with them. You'll find these people on Instagram or Facebook. On Instagram, you'll use hashtags. On Facebook, you will use Facebook groups. On LinkedIn, Twitter, you could use those as well. But you're going to want to message them something like, hey, I just came across your profile and wanted to connect. I'm host of this podcast. I would love to connect with you more. Something simple like that, and then you engage with them over and over. You follow them, you engage with their stuff, you like their stuff, interact with their stories, and you're building actual connections. And then these will be the people that will drive traffic to your podcast for you. You know, once you have a connection with them, they'll tell their friends, they'll tell their family, they'll post about you, they'll reshare you. So those are the main ways that I would recommend increasing traffic to your podcast. Just to recap, transcribe so you can get the SEO on your website, or, you know, repurpose it for different content. Number 2, figure out what social platform you want to use and have a strategy behind it with those 3 buckets that I talked about. Just have a strategy. I cannot say this enough. Have a strategy behind your social media, or else you will be confused and overwhelmed and all of these things that are not too fun to experience. And then the third one is to either think about running ads or do it manually and do some DM outreach to just 5 people a day. 4 times a week, 20 people a week, get to know them, connect with them, and they will listen to you. So if you have any questions about any of this, let me know. You can find me on Instagram at Espresso Podcast Production. You can message me here. I'm always around. You can visit my website. I just launched my first course. So if you want to start being a guest on podcasts, I have the training for you. We talk about how to create your story. We talk about how to, again, the strategy, because if you go on a podcast, it can be fun, but you need to get something out of it. You need to know exactly what you want out of the podcast before getting in and recording. So we talk about that, how to make your plan, your strategy. We talk about scheduling. We talk about how to promote yourself, how to get the most out of being a guest. We talk about the tech part of it. It's really, really great. You can find it on my website, or I will post it in the group later today because I'm so excited about it. So definitely check that out, and I am always around to help you. So if you have any questions, I am here for you. Okay, have a great weekend. I hope this was helpful, and I will talk to you next Friday.